Nobody listened no matter how many times experts warned humanity about climate change. And by 2019, a series of hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, and droughts had caused widespread devastation. Following the loss of multiple cities, world leaders, led by the United States, collaborated to find a mechanism to neutralize the storms using a network of thousands of satellites, each launching countermeasures aimed to alter the basic constituents of weather. Jake, the principal architect, built the Dutch Boy network of satellites. For the time being, it was a US-owned company, but the Dutch Boy would be handed over to an international council after 3 years. Jake is summoned to a disciplinary hearing before a US Senate subcommittee one day after punching a federal inspector and bringing Dutch Boy online without authorization. Jake refuses to take the reprimand and responds with sarcasm, disregarding texts from his brother Max pleading with him to stop. Jake explains that he struck the police because he wouldn't stop handling machine parts that nearly killed him, and that he used the Dutch Boy to prevent a series of storms that would have killed thousands of people. The Senate is unconcerned. All they want is for Jake to be obedient. So they plan to send new employees to the station to keep an eye on things and force Jake to terminate some of the existing team members. After the meeting, Jake meets Max, who works for the US Secretary of State. Max has been appointed as the project manager for Dutch Boy, and he has decided to fire Jake because he believes it is in the best interests of the project. Jake is devastated to learn that his brother is capable of doing this to his family and refuses to speak to him again. 3 years later, a team stationed in Afghanistan receives some strange data on their scanners and proceeds to investigate a nearby town. To their surprise, the entire area has frozen over and the people have died. A recording of this discovery is delivered to US President Palma and his team, who agree that it must be kept secret for the time being. There is evidence that Dutch Boy caused this, but lawmakers don't want to shut it down because the press will quickly jump on it to find the source. Max suggests sending someone to investigate the malfunction, and Secretary of State Deckham advises him to choose Jake for the task since, as much as Max dislikes his brother, Jake is the one who understands the station the best. Meanwhile, the satellite in charge of Afghanistan returns to the Dutch Boy to be checked on. Engineer Habib discovers an unusual date on the hard drive and decides to make a copy, which he keeps in his locker. After that, he tries to return to work, but when he walks into an empty room, the doors close around him and the windows break. Habib is ejected into space and perishes instantly. The next day, Max pays a visit to Jake, who is living in Florida after his divorce and seeing his daughter Hannah twice a month. Jake doesn't want to meet Max and attempts to dismiss him, but Max tells him about Afghanistan and the airlock disaster and invites him to rejoin the project. As Jake turns him down, Max convinces himself that his innovation is killing people. Later, in the Pacific Climate Council's Hong Kong offices, Long checks into the system and discovers something strange about the incident in Afghanistan, so he attempts to phone Max to warn him, only to be met with voicemail. Following that, he walks to the store to grab some goods, noting how hot it is. In fact, the heat is so intense that a cat is attempting to stay inside the market fridge, and when Long drops his eggs, they fry on the street. Long notices flames whirls devouring the streets when the ground begins to shake. He promptly flees in his car, driving around all the panicked people and the crumbling buildings. Long doesn't stop until he reaches a road outside the city and the temperature drops, indicating he's out of range. But when he turns back, he finds Hong Kong in ruins. As it's time for Jake to depart, Hannah sobs because she fears he won't return and he's always been difficult to count on, but Jake says he'll return. Jake is aboard a shuttle and heading to the Dutch Boy moments later, feeling at home in space once more. Commander Fassbinder, the station's top scientist, introduces him to her primary staff, which comprises Security Officer Dissette and System Analyst Duncan. They believe the Hong Kong tragedy was caused by a gas explosion since that is what the press reported. But Jake believes it was caused by the same thing that froze the village. Meanwhile, on Earth, Max is spending time with Sarah, a member of the President's Secret Service. They are interrupted by a phone call from Long, who informs Max of the heat he felt before the incident occurred, indicating that it was not a gas pipe. He attempted to contact the Dutch Boy to validate his theory, but his account has been blocked, as Max discovers. Someone in the government is covering up a system flaw, which has the potential to unleash a geostorm, which comprises of multiple catastrophic weather occurrences occurring simultaneously around the world. Max offers to look into it, and as he hangs up, he discovers Sarah has been called to work because the president has chosen to give a last-minute press briefing, which seems pretty abrupt. When the power goes out at the office, Long continues to try to log in. He hears voices approaching into the corridor and flees to hide, allowing Long to observe how American agents grab his computer and all of his documentation. Jake discovers in the Dutch Boy that the malfunction wiped clean the Afghanistan data, so he directs the crew to investigate the logs of the other satellites for any signs of manipulation. The following day, Max pays a visit to his friend Dana, a cybersecurity expert who works for the government's IT department. He requests that she investigate the blocking of the accounts, and Dana verifies that someone coded this to appear to be a glitch, but it was absolutely purposeful. Jake has a video conversation with Max and the Dutch boy, who advises him that there may be some foul play involved in the incidents. Jake is relieved to hear this because he knew the Dutch boy was well built, and Max gives him permission to fetch the Hong Kong satellite. This sparks an argument since Jake believes he doesn't need Max's permission to do anything. And Max reminds him that after their parents died, he had to clean up after Jake's stupid mistakes all the time. He's tired of being responsible for his brother. Therefore, Jake will be fired again if he doesn't behave. The Hong Kong satellite arrives at the station, but the robot arm that collects it goes mad and starts shaking about, damaging a section of the hangar before dropping the satellite. The fall completely destroys the satellite, and the team must rescue the few remaining bits. Unfortunately, the collision caused an electrical short and fried all of the drives, so Jake believes there is no evidence of corruption to evaluate. Nevertheless, Dissette informs him that he has been watching the film of Habib's death and has uncovered something. The panels that exploded contained drives, and one of them became caught in the communication tower. Jake and Fassbinder embark on a spacewalk to recover the panel, but Jake's suit malfunctions and he loses control of his actions. The shaking forces him to drop the panel and collide with the station, so he ejects his jetpack and grabs a cable to keep from floating away. Fassbinder then drags him back inside, and Jake admits that he took the disc from the panel before letting go of it. When the crew comes to check on them, Jake doesn't tell them about the drive since he believes one of them destroyed his suit. Following that, he and Fassbinder check the drive and detect no traces of corruption, confirming that the so-called mishaps were caused on purpose. Jake tries to locate the login information hidden behind this programming, but he is denied access. Meanwhile, Long arrives in DC and agrees to meet Max and Sarah at a cafe. But as Long prepares to cross the street, he is pushed in front of a car and severely injured. The unknown man flees in his own car, and Sarah attempts to pursue him but is too slow. Max rushes to Long's side and hears him say Zeus before dying. A few hours later, Max receives a phone call from Jake and answers it since he claims it is an emergency. Before revealing the entire narrative of the day they went fishing with their father, Jake merely wants to apologize for his behavior and remind Max of an unsaid code between brothers. Max realizes what he's doing and rushes over to Dana to offer her a video of Jake's narrative. Dana is perplexed as to how this is an emergency, and Max says that they never went fishing as kids, implying that Jake is attempting to relay a message in code because he believes he is being watched. Max gives Dana the code they used as kids, and Dana pieces together different minutes from the video to construct the genuine message: evidence of sabotage at the highest level of government, trust no one. Subsequently, Max requests that Dana investigate Project Zeus, and Dana discovers a file that is doubly encrypted in a White House security network that cannot be hacked. She will need the proper credentials to shatter it. Sarah gets home moments later and discovers evidence of a break-in. She pulls out her revolver only to find Max and Dana, who don't want anyone knowing they're there. Max requests Sarah's credentials in order to steal the information. At first, Sarah refuses because it would violate her oath, but she changes her mind when Max points out that if he's asking for something so severe, it must be really necessary. Returning to the Dutch boy, Jake and Fassbinder examine the surveillance cameras and discover Habib has something hidden in his locker. Nevertheless, when they check it out, they discover that the locker is empty. Suddenly, Dissette appears, aiming his gun at them, and because he doesn't immediately shoot them, Jake realizes Dissette wants to know who killed Habib as well. Dissette admits Habib's belongings are in a different locker after ensuring they're all on the same side. He claims that he observed the security cameras as well but said nothing since he expected the criminal to disclose themselves by coming to damage the stuff. The trio enters the right locker and discovers a duplicate of the disk, revealing that someone has planted a virus in the station's system. Meanwhile, Sarah provides Dana with her login credentials, allowing her to access the files on Project Zeus. She discovers a series of simulations that conclude with geostorms, and Max learns that the simulations were used to make the storms happen in real life. Following that, Max has a video call with Jake to alert him that someone is weaponizing the Dutch boy to attack certain cities, and Jake verifies that they are doing so via the virus. He wants to temporarily turn off the Dutch boy so that a reboot will flush out the virus. Max agrees, but there's a catch. The only person with the death codes is the president, and Jake doesn't trust Palma. Only someone with authority can ban their accounts, and it's no coincidence that the US must hand up responsibility of Dutch boy to the International Council in 3 weeks. Max instructs Jake to keep a watch on the satellites as he attempts to collect the kill codes. President Palma is leaving in a few hours for a national conference in Orlando. Max meets Sarah in secret and tells her that the conspiracy is genuine and that she must assist him in stealing the codes. To get on the plane, Max tells his superiors that he's going to see his father in Florida. At that time, the Dutch boy receives warning messages suggesting that 200 satellites are malfunctioning, with the majority of them approaching critical status. The results are quickly felt on Earth. A tremendous hailstorm hits Tokyo, and an offshore cold snap destroys half of Rio de Janeiro. Because he is still unable to shut down the station, Jake decides to launch the extra satellites to replace the ones causing havoc all across the world. They manage to replace the one in Rio de Janeiro before the rest of the city collapses. But at the same time, another alarm arrives. A geostorm is brewing. On Earth, Max learns of the devastation and receives an alert on his tablet, finding that the hurricane is headed for Florida next. Deckham approaches him, stating that he knows Max's father is dead and demanding to hear the truth. Max informs him that the president is responsible for an impending geostorm. But Deckham has terrible news. They can't extract the codes from Palma since the president is the code. They need his fingerprints and his eyeballs to activate the shutdown, so they can't help but argue with him. The Dutch boy team is astonished to see that the station has started the self-destruct sequence on its own. They try to override the directive, but the system locks them out, and Jake thinks Duncan is the only one who knows how. As the station begins to explode one area at a time, Jake orders the crew to escape before confronting Duncan. He finds him still on the computers and starts beating up on him. But Duncan has a revolver hidden beneath his desk and uses it to get Jake off him. Duncan then acknowledges that he did install the malware and that he took the fraudulent cash from the government because his software engineer salary is ludicrous. He also admits that he wants to watch the globe burn. Jake moves swiftly to disarm Duncan and beat him up again. But Duncan retrieves the gun and mistakenly shoots at a window during the battle. While Duncan is ejected into space, Jake runs into another room and closes the door. Back in Florida, Deckham brings Max into a secret chamber, claiming that they would meet with the president there, but it's all a ruse. It turns out that Deckham is the real evil guy, and the president is clueless, so he tries to shoot Max for knowing too much. Max escapes through a back door and meets with Sarah, informing her that a storm would kill everyone here, implying that Deckham will eliminate all presidential contenders at once. He handed Max command of the Dutch boy and instructed him to hire Jake on purpose, believing that the brothers' incessant fighting would prevent them from recognizing the reality. Their only option is to kidnap the president, so Max leaves to prepare a car while Sarah shoots in the air, pretending to see someone in public about to shoot Palma. While Sarah and another security accompany the president, emergency protocols are implemented. But as soon as they're alone in a corridor, Sarah knocks out the bodyguard and orders Palma to accompany her to a self-driving car Max has kidnapped. The geostorm reaches Earth while everyone on the station is evacuating. Tornadoes smash Mumbai, a catastrophic heat wave hits Moscow, and a mega tsunami hits Dubai. When a lightning storm strikes Florida, Max and Sarah manage to get the president out of the stadium before it is demolished. Deckham also escapes barely in time, sending his men after Palma, who is being told the whole truth by Max. Sarah needs to drive like hell to avoid the lightning, the ruined roads, and the gunfire fired by Deckham's men. There isn't much time left, so Sarah chooses to drive backwards and shoot at most of the men before colliding with their automobile. When struck by lightning, the automobile flips and explodes. Meanwhile, Deckham gives his bodyguard a rocket launcher to shoot at the president's car. The rocket hits its target and the automobile explodes. But Sarah appears behind Deckham and kidnaps him. She used the self-driving system to relocate the car and set up the trap for Deckham. And now the cops are on their way to arrest him. Deckham tries to convince Palma that he did it to eliminate their adversary, and that he doesn't consider it genocide because science is just playing God anyhow. And he believes Jake would agree because he developed such a strong machine in the first place. Max punches Deckham after hearing his sibling being humiliated. Hannah is concerned as the news begins to report all of the natural calamities and the Dutch boy's lack of response. Jake decides to stay at the station as the last shuttle departs because the reboot must be done manually. Fassbinder tries to stay as well, but Jake dismisses her. Palma, meanwhile, is transported to the Kennedy Space Center and quickly initiates the death codes. But, because the self-destruct mechanism cannot be reversed, the brothers must say their final goodbyes in tears. After all these years, they reconcile, and Max swears to look after Hannah. As the station continues to burn, Jake rushes to put on his astronaut suit and attempt to access the computer, but the door refuses to accept his code. Fortunately, he is surprised to learn that Fassbinder did stay behind and that she knows another way to leave. They both reach the computer and manually reboot it, with Fassbinder flushing out the virus and Jake shutting down the satellites, successfully stopping the geostorm. The room explodes at that point, and Jake and Fassbinder are left floating outdoors. Jake sees his construct perish and realizes there is still a satellite, so they let the blast wave propel them toward it. The duo gets inside, but the station destroys itself and NASA loses contact with them, so they can't control the satellite to bring it back. A light appears on the screen, producing a mayday pattern. The satellite was pushed away by the explosion, indicating that Jack and Fassbinder are safe. One of the evacuation shuttles returns to pick them up, and everyone is safely back on Earth a few hours later. Max and Jake reunite, and they share their first hug in years. 6 months later, Jake, Max, and Hannah go fishing and find it uninteresting, finally understanding why their father never accompanied them. Jake will travel to space in a week to build a new station and wishes to spend one more pleasant moment with his family, but he promises to return. Subscribe for similar content, enable notifications, and like the video to help the channel. Thank you for watching.